Bom dia! Today's song is Apesar de Você by Chico Buarque. Enjoy!
Amanhã vai ser outro dia. Amanhã vai ser outro dia.
Hoje você é quem manda, falou, tá falado, não tem discussão, não. A minha gente hoje anda falando de lado e olhando pro chão. Viu você que inventou esse estado, inventou de inventar toda a escuridão. Você que inventou o pecado, esqueceu-se de inventar o perdão. Apesar de você, amanhã há de ser outro dia.
Welcome back once again to another episode of the Brazilian Spot, the cultural podcast about Brazilians for gringos. The week ahead is hot, but not as hot as my Brazilian spot. Today, we'll be covering a new topic in our podcast, literacy. While most of you might not quite know what literacy is, after this podcast, I assure you want to know more. This new section of our series won't begin with a guest speaker, but instead my own story about literacy. Not quite how I learned my native language or how my Portuguese classes were, but how I actually learned English. Most of you were thinking right now about English class and your teacher's telling you that the apple in the text symbolizes Adam and Eve and all that. Well, sure, that is part of my story, but there are so many other ways through which I learned English that people don't know about. Today's fun fact: did you know that less than 1% of the Brazilian population speaks English? Let's get to it. Okay, well, where to start? So, this whole story goes back way back to my kindergarten years. For the first few years of my education, I was at a bilingual elementary and middle school. It was fun and all. My Brazilian teachers were good at English, and whenever I spoke Portuguese, they'd call me out, and eventually you'd come around to speaking English during breaks with your friends and stuff like that, but every once in a while, we wouldn't do that, and as it was quite hard for us, right? Like, it was a whole new language. But between Portuguese and English, most letters are pronounced in a different way. Not only does it sound different, but also does it require you to articulate your mouth and tongue in such a different way that honestly just exhausts someone who's speaking English while having a different native language. Even today, when I'm tired, I begin to put less effort into the clear articulation of my words. And back then, something I do remember struggling with was naming animals. To be honest, that is quite silly, but whenever I'd come play with my friend Diego, I wouldn't be able to tell which animal characters I wanted to play with because I'd often forget their name. So I don't know, I'd call a giraffe or crocodile, or the elephant would be the rhinoceros, and at the end I wouldn't be able to tell which character it was. Games are fun, but I always struggled with weekdays, which consequently made me lose many dates and deadlines. Not gonna lie, I still have to say the weekdays to myself so I know whether Tuesday or Thursday comes first. So, what is literacy and how does it come into play right now? So I had my friends and my classes, but my skills weren't much better than basic conversational English. So I'd say my literacy in English was social and childish at best. I knew basic English words and how to write about my weekend, saying the Sunday was sunny, but Saturday was rainy. But it didn't get much better than that. If I had to use English to ask a doctor for help in the US, I doubt it would be very clear. Moving a few years ahead, by the time I'm 8 now, I moved to a Brazilian middle school, which was fun. Me and my friends would speak Portuguese the entire time, and it was absurdly easy. When we get to the English class, you probably know how it would go. Miss Rosa, can I go to the bathroom? I don't know, Marco, can you? So funny, bro. Nah. Okay, fine. They were trying to teach me basic English, but fast forward 3 years later and I'm still in the same school when doing the same exercises. I'm not kidding when I say that my English had not changed the slightest through all those years. Within the Brazilian educational system, it seems like the profound lack of effort from the teachers to assure their students succeeded was clearly affecting me. My English teacher, he wouldn't give me feedback on a lot of my work. Yeah, he would give me like 85%, 90%, like a good grade, but not that good. How was I supposed to know what I was doing wrong? Worse, the bridges for communication between students and like the faculty were basically non-existent. If I had to send an email to him, it wouldn't be possible. Like, there are no ways in which I would be able to communicate with my teachers. That's not all. The most infuriating part was that when I did manage to speak to him in person, he would always use an excuse about being too busy, or that he couldn't talk to me because he had a meeting or something like that. And every single time, almost every class, he had something right after it and he couldn't speak to me, not even for a minute. Inevitably, my English level stayed the same, and I wasn't going to improve thanks to that class. That wasn't until I met Minecraft, my love, infinite possibilities, tearing down AI-made villages, my passion, my dream come true. Jokes apart, gaming was a big phase of my life. Between 5th and 9th grade, because of the horrendously small amount of homework I had, I'd basically get home at 5 p.m. and stay on my computer until bedtime. I kid you not, at least 5 hours of computer a day. I think I amassed a total of like 16,000 hours of Minecraft throughout my life, which would like sum or like synthesize around a year of playing, which is a lot of time. For the first few months, I would only play by myself on single-player worlds, but later I found out about online servers. I barely knew how to say the name of the objects or what the difference between ladder and leather were. I remember taking minutes to try and find the name of an object I wanted. Eventually, online servers led me to join voice channels and chat, and those were the gold mines. It had been years since English was an active part of my life, but once I began using those too, and English was my only way to communicate with people, I was forced to know how to speak it. Well, you can imagine that it didn't start so well. I have a few pictures on my computer of messages I sent in 2015. In one, I had written want with an H, and in others, I would add en to the end of words in Portuguese as a way to Englishify them. And of course, they made no sense. Even worse, I didn't know how to formulate questions. When I meant to ask, do you have stones? I would say, you have stone. And people would reply laughing like crazy saying, yeah, I know. But those were barely scratching the surface of how bad it was. The worst part was that people took advantage of me. When trading items in the game, I wouldn't quite know how to set ground rules, and when I'd ask them to give me something in return, they would make it sound like I was getting what I had asked, but my lack of proficiency in English would lead me to getting the worst end of the deals. Over time, people got extremely exhausted of my poor English and began correcting my writing. And with the advancement of technology and the introduction of voice chats, I'd speak to people, and my mother, who was often next to me, would correct any mispronunciations I'd make. Doing that 5 hours a day, 365 days a week, eventually it led me to having good conversational English. My social literacy was outstanding, which also helped me in school. Fast forward to 2017, it's 8th grade, and I'm in English class preparing myself for the oral presentation. For 8th grade, the difficulty was extremely silly. We had to explain how our vacations were and what it is we do for a hobby or something like that. I had a speech prepared. My partner went up and began her speech. I remember it clearly. Hello, me name are Anna. I doesn't met with my friends. I meeted with family. Me went to vacation to ski. What is my hobby? Me wasted very happiness. As you can see, it was pretty bad. I was horrified to think that it was 8th grade, and people couldn't even form basic sentences and conjugate the simplest verbs, like was or were. Later that year, I came to ask my professor for an essay I had completed over a month ago, and still hadn't received it while my entire class had. I went to his office and requested it. I saw him go to his desk, flipping around some things, finding my essay scuffled in the back of his drawer. Instead of saying he hadn't read it yet, he drew a line across the table designated for detailed grading and wrote 85% in the grade box. The grade was fine, sure, but I knew the essay was better than that. I had to put a lot of effort into it, and I was sure I had at least a 95%. So I decided to ask him why he gave me that grade. And he said it was liking some elements. I asked, which? And he replied by saying, some general writing elements. Look inside for more feedback. So I proceeded to open the essay right in front of him, and there were no markings and no feedback whatsoever. And once again, I asked him what was wrong, and he hastily replies, I have to rush to class, can't talk right now, come talk to me later. After that, all my attempts at talking to him were excused by some random thing. While my English had largely improved because of my video games, and it stood out explicitly from the other people in class, my teacher continued to neglect my skills and wouldn't consider sending me up to a higher level. So, how was my literacy shaped like that? Well, I'd say unshaped. Most, if not all of my English skills came from video game chats. While my teachers' neglect to help me improve and the poor learning environments in which I was studying showed me that my social literacy was great, but my academic was barely significant and strongly neglected. After being refused worthwhile feedback, I came up to my mother and asked her to send me to an American school, or somewhere I'd be able to develop my English skills adequately. That's when I transferred to Graded, the American School of São Paulo. I have to say, those were the best years of my life. Only about 50% of my graduation class was Brazilian, while the rest came from all around the world. My two best friends came from Netherlands and Colombia. I was amused by it. In order to prepare myself for this change, my mom decided to send me to an English and math intensive summer program in Vancouver. You send your son to Canada and you'd expect his English to get better. Well, it's a surprise when he comes back with fluent Spanish. But even then, I was able to learn much more English than in my Brazilian school. At Graded, I couldn't speak Portuguese to most people, simply because they didn't speak the language. English became my day-to-day language, and all of my classes were in English, taught by American, British, Canadian, or Australian professors. This way, my social English was excellent, and the all-day-long English practice alongside an extra class for improving my English made it so that my skills were impeccable. My academic English speaking and knowledge skills were growing exponentially by the week. Now, a bit of a more nerdy part of my life. At Graded, I had begun participating in so many clubs, which was something that didn't exist in Brazilian schools. By my sophomore year, I was a member at 12 different clubs, and one of my favorite ones was debate. Now, that is truly where I learned how to form an argument and use it in a way that makes it sound so much more persuasive. Thanks to the leaders of my club, who were at the time seniors in my high school, I was improving exponentially on a weekly basis. Whether they were tips on how to manipulate my speech with tone, narrative, or even how I stood in front of people, every little comment would slowly embed into my mind. Watching how the mistakes my peers would make allowed me to weaken their arguments and use that in my favor to also learn from what they were saying and using it as an essential tool for teaching myself how to behave. Not only that, but also all the presentations I had to do for those clubs and for the classes taught me to how to truly use PowerPoint and make it so that my English is concise and clear. Because when you're trying to teach a bunch of 9th graders about debate, you don't want to make a very long speech, otherwise they're not going to pay attention. For almost every club meeting, I had to prepare slides and classes to teach people about tips, policies, and debate formats so that they would be able not only to follow the guidelines, but also prepare themselves in the best way. So clear communication was very important. Teaching required it. Now, every other Friday we would have small debate trials in order to practice, and it was at those times that I was able to develop my speech and argumentative literacy. And it was so amazing. The ability to structure this beautiful argument with amazing flow and clear communication is rewarding. My communication literacy came from that, which helped me in various other spectrums such as my academic literacy, especially when it came to essay argumentation. Stories and stories, but it all came down to literacy. All those moments shaped the literacy that I developed and know. At the start of this podcast, literacy seemed as simple as English classes, but now I would break them down into 3 English language categories: social, academic, and technological. This is literacy. The American school made all of them develop in ways I had never thought I'd see. Under social, I see my growth from my childish lexicon to one with good flow through video games, high school environment, and active club participation. Technological literacy ties up with social literacy, where technology, chats and voice chats, forced me to develop socialization skills that would allow me to use technology. Literacy is so much more about the skills you need to be fluent in an environment than just knowing the language. Literacy is contextual. And furthermore, technology also developed my academic literacy, where knowing how to use proper English in different technological contexts, such as PowerPoint, WhatsApp, or Discord, was a great advancement of my academic writing and communication. Finally, school played a big role in my academic literacy when I got into my American high school, because before that, it was useless. Graded would later take me into an American university, something I had never imagined would be an option, especially at the undergraduate level. Now, I see this as a new environment where English is the only language that shapes my literacy. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for this week's episode and listening to my story. I hope you were able to enjoy this podcast and learn about literacy as something that is so versatile. Take my story and see how your literacies are shaped by the different environments you are in your daily life, whether those are languages, sports, or anything else you enjoy doing. This ends today's episode of The Brazilian Spot. I'll be waiting for you next week. This week's recommended song, Chega de Saudade by Antônio Carlos Jobim. Link in the video's bio.
Foi numa tarde de domingo que alguém perguntando por ela chegou, deixando meu coração tristonho, enciumado, morrendo de amor. Eu falei, eu menti, eu chorei, eu sorri dizendo. Eu falei, eu menti, eu chorei, eu sorri dizendo que ela mora no meu peito
e eu moro vizinho a ela.
Que eu fico desse jeito,
pensando nos beijos, nos carinhos dela.
Carolina, Carol, Carol, Carolina.